If you want to know the secrets of existence and the true meaning of life, I can't help you. But if you want some book recommendations, why not try reading the ones I wrote? If you're a fan of giant monster mayhem and anime weirdness, why not try Operation Red Dragon: The Kaiju Wars Part 1? If horror is more your style, you can't go wrong with The Occult Mafia. Those who enjoy their fantasy with a dark twist may be interested in Emerald of Maddox City. And if you're interested in shared universes, why not read all three? Hop on down to the description for links to all 3 books on Amazon. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. An image of a huge bird, easily 300 feet tall, filled the screen. The bird had an abnormally long neck and a face that looked almost reptilian in nature. The bird's feathers seemed out of place. The feathers looked almost as if they were non-organic. Mackenzie immediately began explaining what the program was and how it could combat the current threat. This is one of the subjects for Project Thunderbird. It is a combination of genetic engineering and cybernetics. Several years ago, we found the skeletal remains of a large creature that seemed to be one of the missing links between dinosaur and bird. We called them Thunderbirds after the Native American legend of a giant bird. The remains of the Thunderbird were much larger than any of the remains of winged reptiles that we had discovered so far. The remains were about half the size of the current model on this screen. Using condors to carry the eggs, we were able to clone several of these Thunderbirds from the remains of the original. Through the introduction of a growth serum that used radiation, hormones, steroids, and through a process of selective breeding 5 generations removed from the original clones, we were able to create a generation of 4 birds between 250 and 300 feet tall. Mr. President, we currently have 4 of these birds with pilots who have been flying them for several weeks on field tests. These birds and their pilots represent our best option for responding to new kaiju attacks quickly and with as few civilian casualties as possible. I propose that we change Project Thunderbird to Operation ROC, Retaliation on Cryptids. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Kaiju Lit Circle, where any monster looks good on paper. A few episodes ago, I reviewed Matthew Denian's Chimera Scourge of the Gods, and determined it to be pretty rough around the edges, but overall an interesting and enjoyable story. Today we return to his bibliography for a different sort of monster outing. Join me, won't you, as we delve into Operation ROC. Quick disclaimer before we continue, just in case you missed it in the Chimera review. I know author Matthew Denian, and we are both currently published through Severed Press. However, I am not making this review to shill for either of those parties, and Matt both knows this and expects that I will give an honest review of his work independent of any personal connection. What you will hear in this video would be no different than if I were an unpublished schmuck who never met another author in his life. Are we all clear on that? Okay, let's get into the plot summary. One day, without any warning, the Jersey Devil destroys Atlantic City, New Jersey. At almost the exact same time, Bigfoot ravages Santa Fe, California. Both of these creatures have somehow ballooned to skyscraper height, and their attacks are not random. It turns out the 2 cryptids, as well as Nessie, Mothman, and many others, are being controlled by Rol Hama, the egomaniacal leader of the Thuggee death cult. His demands are simple. The world must acknowledge Kali, Indian goddess of death, as the one true god, and the Thuggee must be given total control over Earth. For every day that goes by where even one nation resists, at least one more city will be destroyed by a supersized cryptid. As luck would have it, the United States government has a top-secret project that just might put Rol Hama in his place. They have developed the ROCs, a quartet of giant prehistoric birds revived by genetic science and enhanced with machinery to become the ultimate flying weapons of war. The ROCs cannot operate on their own, however. Though they are living, thinking creatures, they need human guidance by way of a neural link. To this end, there are 4 pilots assigned to the beasts: Captains Crow, Green, Monroe, and Bixby. For one reason or another, these former pilots have been deemed physically unfit to fly aircraft, but they can guide the ROCs into battle. That is, if they can overcome their own psychological issues. In some ways, you could compare Operation ROC to Pacific Rim, Except instead of 2 pilots controlling a giant robot, you have 1 pilot bonding with a giant bird, and instead of kaiju from another dimension, you have cryptids ballooned up to incredible size controlled by the villains from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But that's just the elevator pitch. Dig beneath the surface and you'll find some more interesting stuff going on.
The first major difference is the threat. The primary enemy here is Raul Hama, leader of the Thuggee, who is described as looking like Dave Bautista.
Okay, gotta pause the review for a second and say that we need to draw Bautista's attention to this book so he can campaign to get it adapted to film and make that vision a reality.
Anyway, as opposed to the nebulous threat posed by the precursors of Pacific Rim, Raul Hama and the Thuggee are very concrete antagonists who prove terribly effective in executing their plans.
Raul Hama is the kind of bad guy who prepares for every eventuality, and he knows exactly how clever he is.
By covering his own tracks and making use of the cryptid's natural shared ability to elude detection, he makes for a great antagonist. He's styled sort of like the alien invaders of the Showa Godzilla films, like the Simians or the Men of Planet X, only without the extraterrestrial origin.
As for the cryptids, it turns out they make for great kaiju.
There is a bit of homage at play with a couple of them. You can't exactly have giant versions of Bigfoot and the Lizard Man without evoking imagery of King Kong and Godzilla, but for the most part, Denian makes excellent use of each creature's unique appearance and abilities. Mothman's glowing eyes, for example, turn out to be the most horrifying kind of lethal weapons, and the lightning-fast rod provides one of the most memorable fights in the whole book.
However, Denian does occasionally stretch the definition of what qualifies as a cryptid.
One of the opponents is Spring-Heeled Jack, who, for those who don't know, was a mysterious figure first reported in 1837. He was described as a curiously dressed fellow who was somewhat demonic in appearance, and he got his name because of his incredible leaping abilities. He's a genuinely mysterious figure, but considering the word cryptid generally refers to more animal-like creatures, his presence here feels a bit random. Then again, he does still make for an interesting enemy to oppose the ROCs.
Speaking of which, part of the conflict involves the pilot's ability to synchronize with their ROCs. And this is where the psychological aspect of the story comes into play.
Crow, Green, Bixby, and Monroe are 4 very different pilots, and this affects their ability to guide the massive birds. The goal is for them to strike some kind of mental balance, forming a bond that allows for give and take between man and beast.
That's where the real tension comes from. Plenty of tension rises from seeing how the ROCs will defeat each cryptid, but the ROCs' performances depend on their pilots' mental states.
Captain Crow is a strict military man, which means he takes each mission very seriously. Unfortunately for his ROC, though, he sees the bird as no different than a standard machine, which prevents him from synchronizing with it. On the opposite side of things, Green, who has a severe leg injury that hinders her own mobility, becomes so taken with the experience of sharing minds with her ROC that she starts losing herself to it, quite literally. When Tracy made her way to Green's room, she knocked, but there was no answer. After knocking twice more, she used her administrative access to open the door to Green's quarters. Tracy's heart sunk when she saw Green limping around the room in a circle and crying with her arms straight out by her sides. She looked like a kid who was pretending to fly, but Tracy knew that in her mind Green was not pretending. She was still experiencing what it was like to be linked with ROC 3. Tracy tried to get her attention. "Captain Green." Green continued to fly around the room, and Tracy tried once more to get her attention. "Captain Green, it's Dr. Curry. Please let me know if you can hear me." Green flew once more around the room and let out another ear-piercing screech. Tracy jumped in front of Green and stopped her dead in her tracks. "Sheena, it's me, Tracy. Please try to focus on my voice." Green stopped and looked at Tracy as tears continued to pour from her eyes. "Tracy, I was back in the sky. I was flying again. I was going over Moscow. The city was beautiful from above." "Sheena, you didn't fly over Moscow. ROC 3 flew over there several days ago. You were just remembering what you saw through your Neuralink." Green shook her head. "No, it was me. I was flying over Moscow. I am ROC 3. I am the ruler of the skies." Tracy forced her to sit down. "You are Sheena Green. You are a pilot who, through a Neuralink, helps to guide ROC 3. Green screeched again and then started shouting at Tracy. No, Sheena Green was a pathetic cripple with nothing to live for. She has no friends, no husband, no children, no one to remember her. I am Rock 3. I have the entire sky. I soar through the air and protect the world from monsters and madmen. I am a hunter who provides for my fellow birds of prey. The world needs me! As for Monroe and Bixby, they seem to be doing okay with their rocks, but they've also made a habit of having casual sex after each mission.
That sort of thing is difficult to keep platonic, and sure enough, every time we see them, their feelings for each other get more complicated.
Right up until the very end, the big question hanging over the story is whether or not their growing emotions are helpful or harmful to their job of guiding the rocks. The answer is something I won't spoil here.
Of course, the presentation of these concepts is vital to making them work.
In the Chimera review, I noted that the technical side of the writing was rough, particularly with the grammar in certain places. Go check out that review for more details.
I am pleased to report that Operation ROC is far more polished, with fewer grammatical issues and better structuring.
Denian's voice is still present in the story, so it's not as if his writing completely changed overnight, but it all runs a bit smoother than the previous book.
At the same time, though, it's a bit of a coin flip as to whether or not you'll buy into certain scenes.
Captain Green's slow descent into madness often involves her screeching and flapping her arms like a bird, which straddles the line between disturbing and unintentionally funny. Your ability to accept things like this will affect your ability to accept the book overall.
Well, that's the long and the short of it.
Operation ROC is a very entertaining work of kaiju fiction. It takes a few concepts familiar to the genre and mixes them up with some great new ideas that make the book feel fresh and original. It has good characters, engaging action, and a very distinct cast of giant monsters.
It certainly has my recommendation. This is a story I think plenty of kaiju fans will enjoy. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Now, if you'll excuse me, I too must fly away.
If you enjoyed what you just saw, hop on down to the description for links to Patreon, DeviantArt, and all of our social media, as well as links for Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, and Emerald of Maddox City, 3 original novels I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.